How would you define heavy metal?
Define it? Well, it's just, I don't know.
That's such an open-ended question.
Ooh. That's a tough one.
Go on, another question.
I don't know, actually.
It's always been an extraordinarily difficult thing to try and talk about because you have to hear it, you have to experience it.
We are the lost generation, people who don't necessarily fit in.
It's a lot of white boy angst.
Metal is all about stirring up the pot.
It was just about I'm gonna fight you. It's like having a 5 foot. Yeah!
You feel the sound. It hits you right here.
It's that anarchy. It's that stuff that makes your parents wet themselves when they're thinking about what their kids may or may not be doing.
El hecho de que el heavy metal haya nacido a finales de los 60 sorprende mucho. En ese tiempo la música pop hablaba de paz y amor, pero aquellos que se interesaron en ver más allá de la superficie descubrieron que no todas las ciudades eran como San Francisco. Otros lugares tenían una historia más oscura que contar.
In the Second World War in Birmingham, that's where all the ammunition was made, that's why it got so heavily bombed. So there's a lot of, bricks all over the place and bombed out buildings, all that kind of stuff.
If you look at the times, it was all love and peace and bells and, free love, and that wasn't the case for industrial, stenchy town of Birmingham.
It's very rough, really, very industrial sort of town.
There's heavy industry of all descriptions in and around Birmingham.
That's why it's called the Black Country. Coal mines and the smoke. As kids growing up, that was embedded in your mentality.
I remember as a kid being in class, and next door to the school was one of these big metal foundries, and you'd be in class trying to study, and you could actually hear the metal hammers and the compressors banging and spitting forth metal and all this smoke, and it was drifting into the classroom, and your books on the desk would be bouncing. You could actually physically feel it. So I sometimes think that's the culprit, I actually breathed that metal into my lungs, it got into my blood.
Algunos dicen que el heavy metal se percibe desde el sonido distorsionado de las guitarras de Kings o Jimi Hendrix, o en la épica y nagada vida de Iron Butterfly. Pero el verdadero metal nació en el infierno industrial de Birmingham en un día común de 1968, que se trastornó asquerosamente para mal.
I worked in a factory doing welding and stuff. It's really peculiar because I was going to leave the job that day. I just joined a band and we were going to tour Germany and whatever else. So it was my last day, if you like, and there was nothing for me to do. They said, well, the person that cuts the sheet metal wasn't in that day, and so they said, well, you cut it because you can't, otherwise you've got nothing to do. So they put me on this sheet metal machine that comes down and chops and bends metal. Of course, I had not a clue about it, I'd never worked on it before. And I got my hand in, it just went straight down. And of course, as I pulled my hand back, I took the two ends off. So after that happened, of course, that blew everything. I was just devastated. I thought I went into such a deep depression.
He was told by his doctors that was the end, But, a guy like Tony Iommi, tremendously driven person. And you weren't going to leave a guy like that behind. He invented his own prosthesis.
We had to make false fingers, really. And he made them out of old plastic bottle tops that he'd melt onto his fingers and then put some leather over the top for the grip.
And
he's like, what the hell am I going to do with this? It hurts to play with them. But he figured out he could tune down. He could detune and play with these plastic fingers. The sound is actually thicker and heavier, and it's a core of the Black Sabbath sound.
Because I took the ends of my fingers off, it made me create a different style of playing, which was great, really, because eventually it became heavy metal.
The big thing for Tony Iommi was the discovery of the Devil's Third. Dun, dun, dun. That very close movement in the music was literally banned in medieval times because they thought, it's a fact, they thought that it conjured the devil.
That's one of those things that, man, you know, as a guitar player and a songwriter, you wish you could have wrote because you were defined immediately.
Before that, we were playing bluesy jazz, you know, and it just went into this. It's hard to, I don't think we can explain it.
A la banda que se conocía originalmente como Air, se unió el cantante Ozzy Osbourne, un carnicero bipolar.
I've always been a very rebellious type of a person from the age of whatever. My father said to me before he died that he always expected me to be in prison all my life, you know, because I just wouldn't conform to the system.
En la batería estaba el soldador Bill Ward y en el bajo Geezer Butler, un contador frustrado aficionado a la brujería.
It's hard to explain to people, but it was like a very close unit, and we had this thing going on with each other that was very strange. And Geezer in particular had all sorts of weird dreams and weird thoughts, you know. It might have been the acid, I don't know.
At the time I was seriously into occult stuff and black magic and all that kind of thing. I had this little apartment which I'd painted black and had all these upside down crosses all around the place, pictures of Satan everywhere. And Ozzy brought this book around for me, and it's like this really old 15th century like old book, and it was all written in Latin. It was all about black magic. It had all these like drawings of Satan and everything in it, and I just had a really weird feeling about it. And that same night, I woke up in the middle of this horrible nightmare, and I just saw this like black shape at the bottom of my bed, just like staring at me. It was like a black, malevolent thing. It's just a horrible feeling of it, and I just totally freaked out. And I told Ozzy about it, and he came up with the lyrics to Black Sabbath.
What is this that stands before me?
It was very different, and we knew it was very different when we done it. It was almost frighteningly different, you know.
Feather in black, where it's points at me.
We had these gigs at the blues clubs, and we thought, should we play that song we'd done? We were trying to see what the reaction would be, and we played Black Sabbath, and God, the people's faces when they heard that.
Oh, no!
La canción inspiró al grupo a cambiarse el nombre a Black Sabbath. Decían, vamos a asustar a la gente. Con $600 grabaron su primer disco del mismo título y a 2 días de haber salido a la venta, el viernes 13 de febrero de 1970, se colocaría como uno de los discos más importantes en la historia de la música.
You only have to say Black Sabbath. That's what heavy metal music is about.
Thank God for that, or thank Satan for that.
Every band that plays this kind of music today takes something from it.
¿Cómo respondieron los críticos a este logro musical que inició una revolución hace ya 4 décadas?
The reviews were unanimous.
Absolutely awful in most of the reviews.
Some of it was we really got slagged.
Nobody thought Black Sabbath
was making art.
One thing you can say about rock journalists is soothsayers they ain't.
When the album came straight in the charts and went up to like number 3 or something in England, and it totally pissed them all off. Because it made them look stupid. And we were still at 18, 20 years old, and so it really appealed to kids of our age. And it was something that the kids had for themselves, kind of thing. It was like a secret almost.
Thank you very much, the show from Rock Center. Thank you.
Zeppelin was, another stratosphere. The guitar playing, the style, the look, the mysticism, it's all very metal.
So you're considered the father of heavy metal. When's the first time you heard the term?
I've never classed ourselves as heavy metal. We've always been heavy rock in my mind. And the first time I heard heavy metal was when I went back to England one time. And I'm doing this interview and this guy said, about heavy metal. I went, what? He said, you're heavy metal. And I said, what's that?
I first heard the term heavy metal in Steppenwolf's Born to Be Wild. If any magazine writer, deserves credit for coining the term as a descriptive license plate for this music, it would be heavy metal Mike Saunders.
Noviembre de 1970, el autor Mike Saunders, un universitario del estado de Arkansas que escribía reseñas musicales, fue el primero que utilizó el término para definir el disco As Safe as Yesterday Is de Humble Pie. Y así fue que el heavy metal fue utilizado para definir la música pesada. Nadie estaba seguro de lo que significaba este término y en qué bandas aplicaba, ni en ese entonces ni ahora.
There is a passion within metal fans over what really is metal.
Rage Against the Machine's not metal.
Kiss is not metal.
Van Halen to me is not metal.
AC/DC could maybe be construed as a metal band.
AC/DC is not metal.
Led Zeppelin are one of the original metal bands.
Led Zeppelin, in my opinion, are definitely not a metal band. I think they're a classic hard rock band. But the thing about Led Zeppelin is, in a way, they gave birth to heavy metal.
Formados en 1968, Led Zeppelin, al igual que Black Sabbath, venían de Birmingham, Inglaterra. Pero en los 70, mientras Sabbath creaba sus sonidos siniestros, Zeppelin dominaba al mundo con otro tipo de metal que no era tan pesado, pero que estaba decorado con sensualidad y con lo oculto y revolucionario a su manera.
Led Zeppelin is the archetype of the ultimate heavy metal band.
Robert Plant is absolutely the creator of the metal vocal style. That high singing and that range, that was unheard of.
Jimmy Page was, in my book, like the first heavy metal rock star icon guitar player.
The thing that differentiated Led Zeppelin is the fact they had John Bonham on drums, which was totally unique for the time.
I think he had the most to do with metallicizing Led Zeppelin.
Zeppelin was, another stratosphere. The guitar playing, the style, the look, the mysticism, it's all very metal.
Jimmy Page became fascinated with the work of an English writer named Aleister Crowley. And Crowley was a famous philosopher, writer, magician, and Satanist who thrived in England between the First and Second World Wars. And so Jimmy Page began collecting some of Crowley's artifacts. And his crowning piece of his collection was he bought this old haunted house on the shores of Loch Ness called Boleskine House, which Crowley had once owned. That got him this reputation as this sort of magically inclined guy.
I've been dazed and confused, so long it's not true. I wanted a woman, never bargained for you.
There was the whole thing about Led Zeppelin. If you played a certain song backwards, you know, there would be a message to the devil or whatever. My friends and I, we used to play it and light candles and scare ourselves. And I remember one time his 80-year-old grandma came in the room and she was like, had a crucifix in her hand and she was like, ay Dios mío, demónico Satan, you know, why are you guys listening to this stuff in Spanish, you know? And that's kind of how it was back then, you know, we would scare ourselves with bands like Led Zeppelin.
What is the message that you're trying to get across, if each of you might answer?
Forget about what everybody tells you you're supposed to be doing when you're listening to it and enjoy yourself.
Led Zeppelin era una banda rodeada de misterio y perpetuaron esta imagen con la portada de su obra maestra sin título de 1971. Cada canción de ese disco se volvió un clásico, pero de todas las canciones sobresalía una.
And Jimmy just takes over.
I think Jimmy showed metal players that they could have ambition, that they could do different things other than just play power chords.
Having as much power that Jimmy had with his guitar, and then being able to go to something as beautiful as the mandolins he used in some of the songs, that takes tremendous talent.
Zeppelin threw the doors open to everything that they wanted to write about and experience. They went everywhere.
Para 1971, las fórmulas básicas para todo metalero estaban listas. El sonido pesado y rasposo de Sabbath y el sonido del buen rock concertista de Zeppelin.
I do think that seemingly every metal band, at its core, is fundamentally using the template Sabbath said or the template that Zeppelin said.
It was the early days, you know, everything was sort of emerging. The first Sabbath record, Led Zeppelin, I mean, what's metal? I don't know, no one knows yet. It's just a bunch of bands that have gone berserk, but they've laid the groundwork.
There are so many rock heroes. We need a rock villain. I want to be the rock villain.
Were you popular in high school?
No.
No.
With the police, I was popular. I was the guy that dressed different than everybody in the whole school, and I had very few friends.
At that age, man, you're looking for any sort of expressionism, something that's going to make you different, where you raise your head above the crowd and you go, hey, hello, here I am, look at me.
Actualmente la letra de las canciones de las bandas de metal es agresiva y oscura, típico. Pero a principios de los 70, Norteamérica aún no estaba lista para las presentaciones de Vincent Damar Farnier, el rechazado más notable de Norteamérica y mejor conocido como Alice Cooper.
Nobody ever tried to do what Alice did. Nobody ever tried to be this sort of bizarre vaudevillian character. Alice Cooper believed fast cars, blondes, switchblades, sensationalism. We wanted to be the National Enquirer of rock and roll. There are so many rock heroes. We need a rock villain. I want to be the rock villain.
Alice Cooper grew up on horror movies as much as grew up on rock and roll. He was the combination of Bela Lugosi, Chuck Berry, Vincent Price, and everything that actually led up to the formation of the Alice Cooper Band.
I want to be the personified Captain Hook of rock. I don't want to be Peter Pan. I want to be Snidely Whiplash. I want to be the guy that wants the rent money. And I enjoyed playing the heavy. We fashioned a lot of Alice Cooper under the Betty Davis character in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. That makeup she wore, the smeared makeup, that's where I got that. Because there was something just so creepy about her.
Cooper llevó el metal oscuro británico un paso más adelante. Su notable gira Billion Dollar Babies en 1973 fue un perverso show de horror, adornado con violencia, necrofilia y bebés muertos.
We were trying to create something that hadn't been done. And what hadn't been done was nobody had taken the lyrics and brought them to life. If you had a lyric like Dead Babies, with Alice, there's just no two ways about it. You have to show the audience that, not just sing about it. You use the stage as a canvas, and you bring it to life.
Going to a concert became something more than like a bunch of guys on stage playing their songs. Once those doors shut on the arena, it does like turn into hell.
Heavy metal's always been about horror. If it was to be classified in the same way as we classify books or movies, heavy metal would fit in the horror section.
An alienated young person is drawn to things that are dark. You're going through terrible transitions of being a teenager or whatever, and darkness feels real good to you.
I'm attracted to the evil. Period. You know, I always was as a kid. You know, it's like, you know, the worst stuff I could find, I'm like, that's what I want to buy.
Some people take comfort in fluffy bunnies during adolescence. Some people like to take out the vivid, technicolor, violent fantasies and draw them on the back of exercise books. And then one day a band comes along that kids just go, that's exactly what I'm feeling now.
I remember one time I was watching TV with my dad, and I must have been about 15 or 16 years old, and Alice Cooper was on TV, and you know, and I'm sitting there watching, my dad's sitting next to me, and I have no idea what's going through his head, and I'm watching, and all of a sudden I hear this voice, and it's my dad, and he looks over at me like this, and he's talking through his teeth like this, and he's really mad, you know, and he looks over at me, he goes, if you ever look like that, I will kill you. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, yeah, Dad, wait till they get a load of me.
My reputation sort of precedes me, you know, as far as killing chickens and biting people's heads off and killing babies. I never did that, for one thing.
Have you
Colonel Sanders kills chickens. I don't.
We always had the taste not to do any language, bad language on stage, or no nudity, because that was too cheap, too easy. To us, that was like, well, that gives it all away. You know, what you do is you suggest. If you just suggest, then you don't have to do it. Our stage show was as bizarre as it could get, but I always saw it as being fun. In fact, Groucho Marx loved the show because he saw the burlesque in it. He brought Mae West to one of the shows. Mae West and Groucho Marx watching an Alice Cooper show. And neither one of them were fazed at all. The audience was going, Groucho Marx. I'm looking for the side and see Groucho Marx and Mae West going, it's good vaudeville.
El heavy metal aprendió una valiosa lección. Alterar vende. La fórmula de Alice Cooper se sigue usando hoy. Evidentemente no nada más en los escenarios, sino que también en las letras, videos musicales y portadas de discos.
The idea of opening the commercial floodgates of theatricality to rock and roll was something that I think we were responsible for. You're so far out on the limb when you're Alice Cooper that you're either going to be the biggest idiot of all time, or you're going to be considered like a groundbreaking genius, you know.
Every time I'll see somebody do something, I go, you can find some old concert of Alice and go, look, he already did it. You completely ripped him off. He did everything first. It's sickening.
Nobody knew what they looked like. You didn't know whether underneath Gene's makeup he was like a murderer. You didn't know.
¿Qué tal si hubiera 4 Alice Cooper? ¿Qué tal si hubiera 4 tipos que pudieran ampliar los límites del heavy metal? ¿Qué tal si estos tipos vieran el alma del metal y vieran signos de dólares?
Nobody knew what they looked like. That might seem trivial, but it wasn't. You didn't know whether underneath Gene's makeup he was like a murderer. You didn't know.
What do you represent? Destruction. Destruction. Yeah, rock and roll. Just power, energy. Yeah.
And it really was like real living superheroes. That's how I got into Kiss, was because they had their own comic printed in their own blood. I was like, off they do. What?
It's a big spectacle, right? What is most important to you, the spectacle or the music? The audience. The audience.
And then to see them on stage breathing fire and spitting blood, believe me, at the age of 11, that's pretty cool.
Historically, people will not remember the music of Kiss. What they will remember is the idea of Kiss.
People are fascinated with Gene spitting blood. People are fascinated with my guitars exploding and rockets going off, and, you know, it's larger than life. It's showbiz.
Some people are hams. I'm the whole pig. I wanted to come out on stage and just take over. Look at me, I'll take my shirt off, I'll shake my ass, whatever it takes.
Here from Kiss is Gene Simmons.
It was always about entertainment and about impact.
Are you a bat?
Actually, what I am is evil incarnate.
Each of us created our own personas. I became the demon. Paul wanted to become the rock star. That's what he always felt like. And Peter had a fascination with cats. And Ace, of course, is from another planet.
In the early days, when we would go on stage, there would be people hysterical laughing at us. You know, and the great feeling was I'm looking at them thinking, you won't be laughing when this is over.
Come on and clap your hands! 'Cause that's what rock and roll is all about. Come on!
Pero la campaña de Kiss, Metal Comic Book, casi se quema por completo. En 1975 estuvieron de gira sin parar, pero su llamativo espectáculo no se refleja en la venta de los discos. A punto de perder su contrato, tomaron una decisión arriesgada. Sacaron a la venta el primer disco grabado en vivo de heavy metal.
You wanted the best and you got it! The hottest band in the land, Kiss!
The beauty of it is you feel like you're at a concert, and the bombs going off from the opening intro to the last bomb, you can almost feel like you get contact high listening to that record.
Kiss Alive vendió más de 4 millones de copias y llevó a la banda al mega estrellato. Pero lo más importante, invitó a los fans del metal a que fueran a ver el espectáculo ellos mismos.
People always ask me, what's the best concert you ever saw? And I always say, are you counting Kiss concerts? Because the 13 best shows I've ever seen are 12 Kiss shows and 1 Prince show.
Everything with Kiss is bigger, better, louder, more. Everything we take to the max.
A wall of amps, you know, I mean, just powerhouse, God of Thunder, Gene Simmons flying. It's amazing.
Oh my God! And then the blood in it explodes the fire. Gene Simmons!
I want to fly to the ceiling. I want to blow fire. I want to spit blood in your face. I got on the yellow brick road, and I went down the wormhole, and I've never returned since.
We've never deluded ourselves with anything except the following. It's our job to make a complete spectacle out of ourselves, period. Stand guilty as charged of the harshest criticism. Those guys make a complete spectacle out of themselves. You're damn right we do. We're serious about making sure our fans get their money's worth.
Después del live album vino el disco de platino Destroyer en 1976 y al año siguiente una encuesta lo confirmó. Kiss era la banda más popular en Norteamérica.
How long have you been waiting in line?
For about 13 hours now.
The line stretched around the sports arena, the numbers into the thousands.
Con Kiss Army eran cientos de miles de fanáticos con una insaciable sed de Kiss. La banda se lanzó a un estadio nunca antes explorado por Sabbath, Zeppelin o Cooper. La comercialización.
Kiss. Cha-ching.
This is Kiss, each sold separately.
T-shirts, posters. If they made it, I bought it.
Put them in any crazy pose you want.
A Barbie doll, a sleeping bag, a lunchbox. I mean, after I go to the office next, I'd see some of this stuff. I go, no, you're not going to put that out. They go, oh yeah, this is going out.
Kiss, each 12.5-inch figure sold separately by Mego.
You know, when we started with merchandise, it was considered very uncool. Merchandise to us is something that goes hand in hand with rock and roll.
I read once where someone said how most bands want to be the Beatles, and Kiss wanted to be Coca-Cola. And that's completely true.
The Kiss Radio.
Kiss has never really ever had an agenda besides capitalism.
So call or send your money now. Here's how to get your Kiss Radio.
And that did transfer over to, I think, a lot of the bands in the 1980s, especially among the Sunset Strip bands in LA. There was a very conscious understanding that you're not successful when your record is good. You're successful when everybody has your record.
El comercializar no volvió a los integrantes de Kiss millonarios. Su nombre estaba en una posición precaria. Era una banda metalera con su credibilidad pendiendo de un hilo. Kiss continuó con un nuevo proyecto.
Wonder who could have done it. Good question, Catman. What do you compute, Space Ace?
Insufficient data at the moment, Star Child.
We'd better look into it.
Kiss Meets the Phantom started with a great idea. Let's make a movie that crosses Star Wars and A Hard Day's Night. Conceptually, it sounds great. When you realize that there was a script and there were lines to memorize and none of us had the slightest clue as to what it took to act, the whole project turned into a debacle. I mean, it was just a disaster.
We've got to find Devereaux.
That's fooling me, Star Child. I'm down to my last few lives.
I remember being at the screening of it, and by the end of it, I was so low in my chair that I wanted to, like, crawl out of the theater.
There was such an uprising in the underground metal community. I was offended. I wasn't just disappointed, I was personally offended.
If I hear you calling, I would get punched out by Led Zeppelin fans that hated Kiss. He sucks, you know, and I would get beat up for liking that band.
It was getting too light. It was getting too poppy. We were getting too, you know, it was just, we were losing our edge, man.
What can I do?
It's not often you see a little guy with a guitar and shorts running around in the audience.
The great thing about Angus Young, this whole schoolboy shtick, he represents this eternal youth in all of us.
On the surface, heavy metal seems to be more rebellious than other forms of music. Is it?
Yes. Rock and roll is rebellion with no cause, just for its own sake. We won't please Mum and Dad America, you know. Well, I tell you what, Mum and Dad America has that.
A finales de los 70, el heavy metal necesitaba ayuda. Kiss había embotado al género con videos caricaturescos y juguetes para niños, pero al mismo tiempo un nuevo tipo de música volvió a encender al metal. Bandas Bandas como Motorhead, Girls' School y Saxon agitaron los ritmos y reemplazaron las letras melosas con historias de alcohol y sexo barato. El metal se estaba divirtiendo. Y ninguna banda lo vivía más que AC/DC.
People love AC/DC because of the atmosphere that they create. They're fun. They're just a barroom band playing on a giant stage with inflatable dolls.
The vibe was it would like lock up your daughters. We had that sort of image, you know, a bit kinky sometimes. I think they thought I was some sort of male stripper at some point.
Originarios de Sydney, Australia, la banda se formó en 1973 por los hermanos Malcolm y Angus Young. Después de ver las letras AC/DC en una máquina de coser, su hermana sugirió que las usaran como nombre, a pesar de las connotaciones del título.
We were in a taxi and he said, "So what's the band called?" I said, "AC/DC." "Hey, you know what that means, don't you? You guys aren't all gay." He said, "What? You're looking for trouble, pal, you know?" He said, no, seriously, all the cab drivers say, you know, if you're bisexual, it's, you know, AC/DC, 50-50. We're going, oh, we better change the name.
Pero el nombre se quedó igual que la creciente reputación de AC/DC. Eran escandalosos, descarados. Y el guitarrista daba saltos con un uniforme escolar.
Not often you see a little guy with a guitar and shorts running around in the audience.
The great thing about Angus Young, this whole schoolboy shtick, is he represents this eternal youth in all of us.
Las locuras de Angus Young eran el complemento perfecto para liderar al cantante Bon Scott, cuya imagen de chico malo impactó al público.
Bon was genuinely someone who would walk off stage, go to the bar, stand there, stand his round and talk to anybody. To me, one of the true great frontmen of rock and roll.
En 1976, AC/DC estrenó High Voltage, el primero en una lista de álbumes clásicos. También se reubicaron en Londres, donde de pronto se sintieron mal interpretados.
When AC/DC came to London, they were regarded as a punk band, unbelievably.
They looked different and they sounded different, and the punks felt that AC/DC could belong to them.
La situación apremiante de AC/DC se dio a notar. Lo punk era lo nuevo, y su agresiva rebelión de 3 acordes retó al reino del metal como la opción musical para la afectada juventud del Reino Unido.
Got to get out there and shove it down people's throats, your ideas.
In the late 70s, Britain was completely falling apart. The whole country was going on strike. There were pitched battles in the streets. So in this whole background, punk appeared.
Punk became very political. And metal was never really political.
It was rebellious, you know, upset your granny, and it was all great stuff.
El punk estaba hecho a la medida para los encabezados y los tabloides británicos se lo comieron. Ahora, oficialmente, el metal había pasado de moda.
Suddenly everybody was in a punk band. You didn't even have to play a note. Just stand there making noise and shove a safety pin through your nostril.
Had this mass exodus of all these musicians going over to join that kind of movement. There was nowhere really for rock and metal and blues artists to play.
Every metal band was like, woo, you know, what's all this about? Because record companies changed their thinking overnight, radio stations changed their thinking overnight, all the media magazines changed their thinking overnight, and metal became a dirty word.
Al mismo tiempo, en los Estados Unidos otro movimiento musical estaba generando toda la atención.
Dude, I have to say, being a child in the 70s, I did not hate disco, like when it first came out. You know, I mean, I'm sorry to say that, especially on this show. But but it got really old really quick. It wasn't metal.
Lo que sea que fuera, la música disco atrajo los gustos de Kiss, cuya credibilidad ya estaba en duda. Para los fieles del metal esto fue un insulto más.
Kiss sold out in the worst possible way when they put a disco record out and cut their hair. It was heinous.
It's like if Batman all of a sudden started wearing a ballerina suit. Oh, damn, Batman! The Incredible Hulk started wearing a thong, you know? And tassels on his nipples.
We lost some fans because of that record. It was one of our biggest hits, but it was also one of our biggest blunders.
Conforme los 70 le dieron paso a una nueva década, el heavy metal enfrentó algunos problemas serios. Ozzy Osbourne dejó Black Sabbath, y una cultura de exceso acabó con las vidas del cantante de AC/DC Bon Scott y del baterista de Led Zeppelin John Bonham. La muerte había marcado el fin para la legendaria banda.
There was no room for replacements. There was no room to have anybody. You know, that was secondary. The idea of continuing by sticking somebody else back there on the roster was just bad taste.
Parecía que el metal iba de salida.
It was a tough time for everybody in the metal world to try and, you know, cling on through those years. You know, what are we going to do here? How are we going to make this survive?
There was a concerted effort to kill it off. You know, this music is finished. You know, it's dead. It will never ever happen again. It's over.
How would you describe a perfect metal rhythm?
The rhythm of metal is a riff. That's why I love metal. The riffs get you crazy. That's metal for me. Metal appeals to your balls. This one's called Hellbent. It's full leather. It just sounded more evil. Heavy metal thunder, baby.
A lot of the stuff that came out of England was metal's answer to punk.
The new wave of British heavy metal absolutely blew me into next week.
Oh, there's Eddie. It was overseas. It was the English hard rock.
Do you want to play your music loud or do you want to play it loud?
All that stuff just jumps out and just goes bam right in your nuts.
Stay tuned for details.
Heavy, la historia del metal. Es difícil de creer que con cientos de millones de copias vendidas en las últimas 3 décadas, el heavy metal, a finales de los 70, se encontraba en su lecho de muerte. El mapa de carreteras que crearon Black Sabbath y Led Zeppelin tomó una abrupta desviación. La música disco se había vuelto una moda, y en el Reino Unido, el lugar de nacimiento del heavy metal, una creciente inquietud encendió un movimiento juvenil que puso al heavy metal al borde de su extinción.
Metal almost fizzled out, you know, around the punk new wave era.
Punk was really an answer to like the dinosaur rock of the 70s. There was no new ideas. There was no new energy. It was almost becoming kind of a parody of itself.
Zeppelin, they'd be doing these 20-minute drum solos and it got really yawningly boring.
It got very technical. You know, the punk thing, I said, to hell with that. We just want to go in the garage, pick up a guitar, mix some noise.
To a large part, it destroyed heavy metal in the UK. Ultimately, I think it kind of forced it to recreate itself.
En busca de un salvador, el heavy metal encontró uno en la misma ciudad industrial de Birmingham, Inglaterra, que produjo a Black Sabbath. Eran 5 jóvenes con un nombre: Judas Priest.
In musical terms, obviously we wanted to do something unique. You had to kind of chisel out your own sort of image and sound.
Priest used to rehearse in the same studios that Sabbath used to work in. We knew that in this room, Iommi had been riffing up and Ozzy had been screaming. You could still smell that they'd been there last week. The roots of metal are very definitely within Priest and Sabbath.
Much as Sabbath started it, Priests were the ones that took it out of the blues and just straight into metal. They were the first ones that were all metal all the time. Up here in space, looking on you, while it's straight, everything you do.
When you go back and listen to some of those early Zeppelin records, they would have bluegrass songs on the record or madrigal tunes. And Judas Priest has said, yeah, that's not heavy. Judas Priest was the first band to take the heavy metal and embrace it as a term and as a music form. We're metal gods.
Formados originalmente en 1970, a Priest le tomó algunos años pulir su sonido particular, pero el resultado fue algo fresco. Una energía abastecida por las guitarras gemelas de Glenn Tipton y Kiki Downey. Y la incitante voz del cantante Rob Halford.
The riffs had that same inherent darkness that Sabbath had, but it just sounded more metallic. And then on top of that, you had Halford's vocals.
Everything Halford's saying, you believe every word of it. Hell-bent for leather. I'm like going, damn straight. You're right. Whatever you're saying, you're right.
Pero lo que realmente los puso en otra dimensión fue una manifestación de moda, una imagen sencilla que iba a tono con el poder de su música.
One of the cool things about Priest is that we're commonly known as being the originators of the look, the image.
When Judas Priest came along, it took them a while to find their niche. In their early days, they were wearing very flowery, almost hippie-fied clothes.
And now back to Judas Priest, and this is Dreamer Deceiver.
I remember seeing them on a British program called The Old Grey Whistle Test, when they were actually very serious, kind of studious musicians. They had none of the whips, leather and chains image that we saw today. Guitarist KK Downing was quite flamboyant, used to wear this big cowboy hat. The singer Rob Halford was in these very flouncy blouses.
We had all this great sound, we had the show, we had the lights, we had all of these great things going on, but there was just something not connecting from the visual perspective. And it was around the time that we brought Hellbent for Leather into the set list. And it was just a great epiphany.
We never sat down and said, let's all wear leather. We fell into it. I think Rob was the first, and then gradually we all started to wear the leather, and it just seemed so right.
The look, the leather and the spikes, which of course, you know, basically came out of Halford's, the way he dressed, because he was gay, which I love.
I have been known to go into one or two S&M shops in my life. And this is only because when we were thinking about this, I had no idea where to go. You know, we didn't have people that made clothes for us. So I would just walk around London looking for alleyways and obscure little doorways and find these places and just go in there and then have one of those and two of those and three of those. Mr. S. Leather of Soho, London. It's a place to go to.
You wanted something that looked extreme.
He wanted it to be like a perfect manifestation of what the music was. I mean, we'd wear like black leather jackets and stuff like he wore. We didn't think we were doing anything remotely gay at all. But that's where it came from, and how many bands looked like that after that?
And within a short time, I think a lot of other metal bands were going, yeah, that's the way we should look too. And so it became a kind of a uniform, a recognition. If you looked at the band's photo, you knew they were metal because of all this, you know, and the chains and the studs, and that's a metal band.
Armados de un aspecto y sonido agresivos, Judas Priest estaba destinado a empezar, pero el progreso fue lento. En el Reino Unido fueron a lo mucho un éxito oculto, y en su primera gira por los Estados Unidos en 1977 abrieron para Real Speedwagon. Pero todo cambió con su lanzamiento de 1980, British Steel. El álbum se colocó en el top 10 británico y, lo más importante, consiguió tiempo aire en las estaciones de radio norteamericanas. De repente, legiones de nuevos fanáticos se alistaban para recibir a Judas Priest y al heavy metal.
Judas Priest is number one.
I remember going to the Starwood and Judas Priest was in town. It was like, dude, the Priest is here.
Priest is the best, man. Priest is the best. I'm telling you. Hey, let me tell you. Oh, Robert Halford is the best. Tango for Brown.
You know, I went to see Judas Priest, and it was, I mean, I got to wear the arm gauntlets, you know, everything spikes, and it was raw, and it was real, and you could relate to it.
Heavy metal rules. All that punk sucks. It doesn't belong in this world. It belongs on Mars, man. What the hell is punk? Priest, 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 priest.
We've always maintained we're a heavy metal band, even during the time periods when metal was supposed to be unfashionable and people were trying to get rid of the tag. We were proud to be heavy metal.
Heavy, la historia del metal.
We knew we'd established the craziest place on God's earth for rock and roll. I promise you nothing but severe pain of the ear, and I will melt you if you've got the balls to come and see us.
Heavy, la historia del metal. Heavy, la historia del metal. En cuanto al éxito de Judas Priest, gran parte de su aclamación la lograron en los Estados Unidos. En Londres, la escena del heavy metal continuaba escondida en las sombras.
There were loads of metal fans in Britain who felt disenfranchised. You had magazines writing about punk and new wave, didn't want to know about the old school, and Priest, Motorhead, AC/DC were largely included by so many people in the media as old school. Suddenly the underground scene, word of mouth, became all important. And it was at this time that the bandwagon, the heavy metal soundhouse in northwest London, came into its own, because a guy there called Neil Kay stuck to his guns.
The bandwagon was a very big pub, and Neil Kay set up a metal DJ night, and he called it Neil Kay's Heavy Metal Soundhouse.
The manager of the pub said to me, "Why don't you play some punk?" But I can't tell you what I told him, except it started in F and finished at F.
In my view, nobody should be allowed to stand on a stage unless they can actually present a total professional thing, unless they really can sing and really can play. Punk was a total anti-attitude towards music.
There was a music magazine called Sounds that I had noticed following the progression of rock. I was reading through it one day and I thought, we need some publicity. This is desperate. So I phoned up Sounds and I talked to Jeff Bart. And I said, I have got a heavy metal discotheque. We call it a soundhouse because the word discotheque sucks. Get your butt down here. I promise you nothing but severe pain of the ear. And I will melt you if you've got the balls to come and see us.
Hard rock, heavy metal, heavy rock, whatever you want to call it, was my favourite form of music. And I just thought it needed somebody to speak out about it.
He did a double-page expose right in the centre of sounds the next week. All hell broke loose. It was as if the floodgates had opened. We went up from about 300 to about 750, 800. There was no room for half of them. They were all outside on the roundabout, on the green, everywhere.
You had kids in denim jackets full of patches, T-shirts that went from Motorhead to Judas Priest to AC/DC.
You kind of felt part of a community. You felt very, very special. It was also a blessed relief after being bombarded here, there and everywhere by other forms of music that you didn't really like.
We knew we'd established the craziest place on God's earth for rock and roll.
You had these weird, crazy things happening. People would turn up and they weren't just playing air guitar, they'd play cardboard guitar. They'd lovingly craft their own instruments. It became a scene within a scene.
Rob Loonhouse. He invented the air guitar probably back about 1976.
Rob Loonhouse was a regular patron of the bandwagon in Kingsbury. Mad as a hatter. Absolutely mad as a hatter. Just an incredible character.
The cardboard guitar syndrome, or, sorry Rob, hardboard guitar, he objected to the word cardboard, started one evening back then when the customary amount of head banging was going on, as it always did. Rob shoved his way forward. The next thing I see is this tall bloke, thin with a beard, and he's standing there with a hardboard guitar, and he's using it, and he's looking so good, I really believe he's playing it.
The great thing was they weren't taking the piss. They were doing it because they loved it.
The next weekend, there was 10 of them. The next weekend, there was 15. Then there was 20. There was no other club like it in the country, and people came from far and wide to see this phenomenon.
Our guitar player, Randy Rhoads, left Quiet Riot to join up with Ozzy Osbourne, and he used to give me phone calls when they were recording those albums and said, "You're not going to believe what's going on over here. The kids in the audience come with cardboard cutouts of a mock-up of the guitar players, kind of guitars they use." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, like, for example, if you were to see Judas Priest, they'd have a flying V, a cardboard flying V like K.K. Downing would have."
Neil tocaba lo que los fanáticos querían oír, y si eras una banda de metal con alguna esperanza, lograr que tu demo fuera tocado en una casa musical significaba todo.
Jeff Bart took my weekly request chart. He published it in Sounds and it went worldwide. That really opened the door. Demo tapes started pouring in from everywhere. Steve Harris, Dave Murray, they came in one night from East London. I'd never even heard of them. "Here's our new demo tape, mate. Do me a favour and listen to it, will you?" And I took it home after the wagon that night, and I put it on my cassette deck, and I started getting all these goosebumps all over my arms.
They just went through the roof. He just was, like, blown away by this piece of music.
I listened to it, and I listened to it, and it was the best I'd ever heard.
Neil Cage started to play it. People at the bandwagon were listening to it. And, wow, this is amazing. This is great. This is a demo? Surely not. These were songs that you could headbang to. You could wave your fist to.
That was Iron Maiden's demo tape.
Heavy, la historia del metal.
When I first saw Iron Maiden, I thought, this is just fierce. I looked at the singer and I thought, I reckon I could do a better job than him now, you know. I mean, I should be singing for those guys.
Heavy, la historia del metal. Heavy, la historia del metal. El club del bandwagon al noroeste de Londres se volvió el epicentro espiritual de la naciente subcultura del heavy metal. Y para principios de los 80, nuevas bandas que prosperaban en velocidad, fuerza y volumen se equilibraban para anunciar una nueva era.
The new wave of British heavy metal was just really a term we invented. in the office one afternoon, there were a lot of young, exciting British rock bands coming out of the woodwork, coming out of the metalwork, if you like. What I didn't realise at the time was how many of them there were.
There was Samson,
Savage,
Diamond Head,
Venom,
Angel Witch,
Saxon,
Fist,
Hank.
They're all school.
the Tigers of Pantang.
But only a few lasted a few years and had a career out of it.
A lot of those bands really didn't make much of a dent over here. Pretty much it was Iron Maiden and Iron Maiden and Iron Maiden.
Gracias a su legendario demo, Iron Maiden desarrolló rápidamente una leal adhesión y una reputación como la banda del pueblo.
They were guys who had all honed their chops in bar bands. They knew how to play their instruments really well. They were actually offered a record deal in '76 if they'd shave their heads into mohawks and play punk music. Well, they stuck it out in the London club scene for a few years. Said, I think we've got a good thing going. We're going to stick with the Iron Maiden plan. See you in 5 years.
Iron Maiden esperó pacientemente hasta que recibió una oferta de disco que les permitía conservar su imagen. Irónicamente, cuando lanzaron su primer álbum autotitulado, en 1980, inmediatamente tanto críticos como fanáticos vieron una relación entre Maiden y los elementos punk que despreciaban.
More than any band at that particular time, they had a little bit of grudging respect from punk writers of that generation, particularly with their singer Paul Di'Anno in the lineup. They had this kind of punk metal edge that I think crossed over to a large extent.
They wrote these songs that were really complicated, like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, prog rock, or Genesis. And then they had the energy of punk. So while punk bands were a lot of times just really playing three chords really fast, Iron Maiden was playing this intricate spider-webby guitar lines that sounded like classical music.
Like there's a lot of that in there. It's very nude.
It sounded more aggressive and more confrontational than pop music did. And if you were a very mainstream, straightforward, good person, you would not want to listen to Iron Maiden.
The timing couldn't have been more perfect when they hit. The genre as a whole was starting to happen, and here comes Maiden. Like, I've never heard this before. This is eviler than Priest. Like, that was my first thoughts hearing Iron Maiden. They're Judas Priest, but more evil. I was like, how'd they do this? How did they do this?
Para 1982 tenían 2 discos en su haber y un magnífico apoyo de fanáticos entusiastas del metal en todo el mundo. Sin embargo, a medida que crecía su popularidad, la banda estudiaba su futuro bastante más allá de las limitaciones de su vocalista Paul Di'Anno.
Di'Anno was very much a punk frontman. He wasn't a great singer, but he was right for what the first 2 albums represented. But with Paul Di'Anno, they were going to be stuck. He was unpredictable and enigmatic in a way that was not acceptable. To move on, they needed a new singer.
Where I first saw Iron Maiden, I thought, this is just fierce. God, this is good. Wow. I looked at the singer and I thought, I reckon I could do a better job than him, though, I mean, I should be singing for those guys.
I left alone. My mind was blank. They got him, Bruce Dickinson from Sanson, and a band who really weren't going anywhere. What did I say? Well, Bruce had a great voice, great range. He was more articulate, more dynamic, more diverse, a better lyricist and a better singer than Paul Di'Anno. It allowed Maiden to move to the next level.
Once you bring Bruce Dickinson into the lineup, you can see that transformation from a band who can get a club going, can get a 3,000 or 4,000 seater venue going. But with Dickinson on board, you're talking about, arena rock at its greatest.
Metal is vaudeville, in a way. The story, the theatre in your head, it takes over. As soon as you go on a stage, You can't be a little pinhead, so you have to blow yourself up. But if you want to be that big to somebody who's right at the back of the arena, you've got to take a real... and you inflate your ego to supersized proportions. It's supersize me, and everything is big, and you don't make a gesture like that. Nobody will see it. Arms get flung, grand gestures, and the person at the back feels like you're much closer.
Con Dickinson al frente, Iron Maiden tenía la persona más grandiosa que la banda siempre había anhelado. Pero hubo un elemento particular que fue más famoso que cualquiera de los miembros de la banda. No tocaba ningún instrumento ni sabía cantar. Sin embargo, Eddie se volvió completamente responsable de proyectar la imagen de la banda y fue uno de los símbolos del heavy metal más queridos.
Eddie was the original alter ego that could express humor and irony and aggression.
They put all their fantasy, as it were, all their image into Eddie. He became the personification of Iron Maiden on T-shirts, on photographs, on album sleeves, on single sleeves.
What you've got to realise is Eddie basically started out as just a head, you know, as a cardboard cutout on a piece of plywood.
It was more like a kabuki kind of mask and was shaped to look a little bit grotesque. And I remember seeing that behind the drummer. We'd do the set, and at the end of it, he had some fake blood gushing out the mask, and actually went all over the drummer's head. He was just covered in this red stuff.
The original Eddie didn't have long hair. They had to give him some hair so he looked like a proper headbanger.
What was the inspiration for this album?
Eddie. I might have never gotten into Maiden if I didn't see Eddie on the cover of that first album, and I looked at it and I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Just shows you how important artwork was and is to music.
I just love the fact that we didn't know what he is. Was he a corpse? Was he a monster? Was he an alien? Because every record, he changed to whatever the theme of the record was. Killers, he's killing someone. Peace of Mind, he's in a straitjacket. Power Slave, he's in ancient Egypt. And then on top of that, when Maiden's playing, maybe if the energy level isn't as high, boom, they bring out the giant Eddie to come on stage. And I was like, oh, there's Eddie.
There was something about the image. It was almost like World Federation Wrestling. It was that kind of larger-than-life escapism thing, and slightly ridiculous. And I think that's why a lot of young kids got into it.
By owning Iron Maiden, you knew you were consuming this art and this aesthetic that belonged to sort of a darker subculture. And that was very appealing. It seemed to say, you know, you think you're alienated, but you're not. There's 2 million people exactly like you.
14 and 22 at that time by the balls and didn't let go.
La historia del metal.
I was like, 13 years old, 14 years old. I used to sell Quaaludes at Starwood, and I saw this band Van Halen play, and I was just like, wow.
If you want to talk about the strip and creating rock and roll, nobody can recreate what they did.
La historia del metal. La historia del metal.
Any band is always influenced by their environment, wherever they come from. Black Sabbath were from Birmingham, very dour, low-key, very working-class oriented, and it certainly shows in their music and their approach and attitude to life. But California, Hollywood, is glitz, glamour, glitter.
A 8,000 kilómetros y un continente de distancia de la tierra donde fue forjado el heavy metal, había un auge en un lugar seductor de distinta clase, y a diferencia de la situación industrial inherente a Inglaterra, este nuevo escenario estaba bañado de sol.
You can't get much more opposite than Birmingham, England, and Los Angeles Sunset Strip. You know, the bright colors and the spandex and the shoes and the boots and the girls.
Up to that point, heavy metal was very much about men. It was macho. It was standing on stage and being very forceful. Now suddenly it was cool to be a character again. Suddenly it was cool to be a little trashy, a little sleazy, a little sexy, as it were.
And that's what happened with heavy metal groups in Los Angeles. They took the essence of the music, but they glamified it.
Before people used the term hair metal, I remember they used to use a term called teeth metal. These are bands who smile. Van Halen created it. This was heavy music, but like the singer likes to be there.
I love talking. I love telling jokes. For me, this is just one big wet T-shirt contest, you know?
They just kind of summed up everything about the California lifestyle. They didn't go in for the trappings, you know, the witches and the mysticism in the woods. It's all about chicks and cars and good times. And they really Americanized heavy metal.
Van Halen se formó en 1974 y pasaron los siguientes 3 años puliendo sus habilidades en los clubs de Los Ángeles.
If you want to talk about the strip and creating rock and roll in LA, nobody can recreate what they did.
I was like, 13 years old, 14 years old. I used to sell Quaaludes at Starwood, and I saw this band Van Halen play, and I was just like, wow.
I used to go to see him at the Whiskey. I swear to God, I used to sit on the stage, and here'd be Van Halen flying all over the place like it was an arena, and there'd be 12 people there. I said to my guys, there's something new going down. And sure enough, Van Halen erupted.
En 1978, Van Halen lanzó su debut autotitulado. Repleto de éxitos en la radio, el álbum obtuvo disco de platino 6 veces.
When Van Halen 1 came up, everyone in Britain just picked up on it. Have you heard this album? It's so different. It's so exciting. It's so fresh. It's so not British.
If there is any design to it at all, the sound of Van Halen is meant to spill over all over your turntable and ruin the rest of your record.
When Van Halen 1 came out, it revolutionized guitar playing. Eddie played with a style that nobody before him ever had played.
Anybody who just listens to the beginning of Eruption, just the beginning, even if you're not a guitar player, the way that hits you.
All that stuff just jumps out and just goes bam right in your nuts.
Every guitar player that came out from that point on, no pun intended, tapped into the Eddie Van Halen style.
Con carisma, fulgor y atractivo sexual, la popularidad de Van Halen se remontó por todo el mundo. Llevaban el heavy metal por un nuevo viaje y todo el mundo era bienvenido, sobre todo las mujeres.
When Van Halen came over to the UK, they supported Black Sabbath on Black Sabbath's 10th anniversary tour. Now, can you imagine that? Sabbath, heavy metal gods, supported by these upstarts from America. Well, what's going to happen? Well, obviously, these upstarts from America are going to get no chance. In fact, it was Sabbath who had no chance. Every night on that tour, Black Sabbath were blown off by Van Halen. It was Eddie Van Halen playing out of his skin and David Lee Roth all over the place, like a mesmerizing figure. Nobody has seen a frontman like Roth before. Roth's showmanship influenced a whole new generation of frontmen.
It's like a Liberace of rock and roll.
David Lee Roth wanted to appeal to the girls as much as the boys, and people loved him for it.
What you see on stage with Van Halen is only what you're going to find underneath the stage. And what you see backstage is probably what you're going to find upstairs in the hotel.
They were completely populist. Van Halen was for everybody. To say you like Van Halen, I mean, that's like saying you like pro football. It was the widest possible net for a rock band to have.
Van Halen hizo el heavy metal más popular que nunca antes. Una vez dado por muerto por críticos como Lester Bangs, la escena ahora prosperaba y también la música. La tercera propuesta del grupo, Women and Children First, salió en 1980. Probaría ser el año dorado del heavy metal.
1980 was magical. It's a magical year in the history of metal. There was a lot of goodwill for this kind of music around at that time.
Punk played itself out, and heavy metal, meanwhile, coalesced into something modern and important at that moment.
This was the year that a lot of awesome albums came out.
Judas Priest put out British Steel.
Lightning to the Nations by Diamond Head.
AC/DC did Back in Black.
Motorhead put out Ace of Spades, which was a huge deal.
Saxon's Wheels of Steel.
Great albums. Ozzy did Blizzard of Oz and discovered Randy Rhoads. So much happened in that year. And for so many bands, it was time to make their mark.
Este fue literalmente el caso para el ex-hombre principal de Rainbow, Ronnie James Dio. Tocando de soporte para Ozzy Osbourne en la principal banda de rock de heavy metal fue razón suficiente para crear su propia identidad. Nunca se imaginó que su rúbrica personal vendría a definir al heavy metal como ninguna otra cosa.
I joined a band that had a singer who did this all the time, who thought he was Richard Nixon. I didn't want to be Richard Nixon, or did I want to be Ozzy? I didn't want to be that. I wanted to do something that was special to me.
All respect.
I call it the universal metal sign.
My grandmother used to do it. She's born in Italy, didn't speak a lot of English, and had her superstitions. She stop the evil eye. I got it. Or you can give the evil eye. See, you can do it. It's antenna, both ways. Works both ways. And I see her do it all the time. It's called the Moloch. It's M-O-L-O-C-H, which is a devil.
I think it's been glorified over the years into this evil, satanic sign. I mean, I remember even in the decline of the Western civilization, some lady was saying it's 666. There's a 6 here, there's a 6 here.
And a 6 here, which represents the 666 in the book of Revelations in the Bible.
I said, come on, man. I think this means I love you in sign language.
It's not just that. I mean, I found all different kind of ways to do it, to create letters with it, to do all kinds of amazing things with it.
You got the single, which is this, and you got the double, and then you got too much metal for one hand, you know?
It's like, for instance, when you say the word Slayer, when people would go up to me and they say, dude, you should play more Slayer, they never said that. They would always say, dude, play more Slayer!
Well, you know, it was meant for a purpose. I tried to create it within the confines of the band Black Sabbath, in the evilness that was supposed to be that band. And now it's crossed over into everything.
Para 1981, el heavy metal se había transformado en una creciente comunidad con su propia identidad. Dio le había dado un saludo, Priest un aspecto, Maiden una mascota. El heavy metal tenía su propio baile, sacudir la cabeza. Cuando Van Halen no solamente lo convirtió en una fiesta, sino que invitó a venir a las chicas, el metal estaba bien posicionado para la revolución que estaba por ocurrir.
Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll.
We're Def Leppard. There's only one way to hear us right, on MTV, in stereo. Stay tuned for details.
La historia del metal.
MTV came out, we embraced it fully. We said, no, we're more Duran Duran than we are Black Sabbath.
I know bands, all they wanted to do was get a video on MTV.
Heavy, la historia del metal. Heavy, la historia del metal.
The explosion of heavy metal really did have a lot to do with the advent of videos on television. Heavy metal was a natural fit for rock video because of its emphasis on the visual.
MTV first hit the airwaves August 1st, 1981.
I'm Mark Goodman.
I'm Alan Hunter. I'm Martha.
I'm JJ Jackson.
I'm Nina Blackwood. MTV was the national radio station. I mean, people tuned into MTV to see the new bands.
Here you had a visual medium that was looking for something to put on the screen. And Supertramp and Joe Jackson just weren't doing it. As a matter of fact, that was the end of their careers. People got to look at them and said, oh my God, put the camera back on Joe Jackson's shoes. We were given a show and visually driven without the video cameras on. So MTV said, well, this is ready-made.
I would say the first band that got airplay on MTV that really broke out, that is considered in the quote-unquote heavy metal genre, would be Def Leppard.
MTV Def Leppard interview, 22/12, 1982.
Siguiendo los pasos de Iron Maiden, Def Leppard fue el siguiente gran suceso en la nueva ola del heavy metal británico. Pero ellos también poseían el brillo y la buena apariencia de Van Halen. Fue la combinación perfecta para la naciente MTV.
We weren't like Black Sabbath or Maiden. We felt it was more like, say, AC/DC, or even more like the Stones. Nothing to do with metal at all, except the fact we played loud electric guitars. You know, MTV came out, we embraced it fully. I know there were some bands that got, no, we're radio bands and we're going to stick to our cause. We said, no, we're more Duran Duran than we are Black Sabbath.
High and Dry de 1981 fue la primera estocada de Leppard con un sonido más esencial, que ganaron al dejar su hogar de Sheffield, Inglaterra, y unirse con el productor de AC/DC, Mutt Lange, quien tenía más ideas para el próximo álbum de la banda.
Mutt Lange, who was our producer, said we should make an album that does open doors and that is different.
We had a piece of paper stuck on the wall in the studio and everybody wrote down titles. Occasionally we got a couple of serious ones.
We were trying to make something that was like Star Wars for the ears. Mutt being the musical equivalent of Steven Spielberg. That's basically what we did.
Pyromania was one of the serious ones, and everybody seemed to like it. And he did have a good image. It's a great word. I mean, I didn't even know what it meant when I first read it. I do now.
Pyromania was one of the first pop metal records, which had more of a melodic pop sensibility. Like, I remember the song that came out right before Pyromania, and it was just Joe Elliott walking around a house going, "Me and my wine, it's something doing mine." And then the next thing was Photograph.
Photograph came out, MTV started playing it, and it just went through the roof.
They were certainly being marketed as kind of like the young, pretty boys from England, and it wasn't all about denim and leather. It was a little lighter than that.
Just before that tour kicked off, Joe and Rick went down Kensington Market, and Rick Allen bought these little shorts with a Union Jack on. Joe bought this T-shirt. During the Pyromania tour, we ended up selling the T-shirts because it became such a popular thing, the Union Jack.
Yes, they were good looking. Yes, they looked fantastic in those little British flag shorts. The stars were in alignment, but we wouldn't be talking about them now if they looked good and made good videos and the songs were lame.
It was just amazing the way the stuff sounded. It was like just so polished. The records up to that point didn't have that finesse. Just hook after hook after hook. You know, you had a guitar hook. The melody in the verse is a hook. The B section's a hook. And the chorus, like, oh my God, okay, God, pull these hooks out of me.
There was metal fans that would buy about 2 million albums. And it was basically like an Aussie audience, and that was kind of hard rock. And if you crossed over into pop, which is what we did, that's when the humongous record sales started coming in. We actually went top 40. It wasn't just rock. It was rock plus.
El éxito de Def Leppard marcó el cambio. Pyromania fue el segundo álbum mejor vendido durante todo 1983, solamente atrás de Thriller de Michael Jackson.
Pyromania helped to define the 1980s, possibly like no other album. I think a lot of bands saw Def Leppard and the formula they had of making these music videos, starting to incorporate some conceptual elements into them, and tried to emulate that template. You know, you look at someone like Ozzy, and here's the Prince of Darkness running around in sequins and eyeliner and hair poofed out to here. Judas Priest started putting color in their black leather.
A lot of the bands took their influence from other classic, really heavy metal bands, and then lightened it up for commerciality, for MTV. That's all they wanted to do, was get a video on MTV.
Habían pasado unos cuantos años desde que los críticos predijeron la funesta muerte del heavy metal, pero cuando los 80 emprendieron el vuelo, eso fue cosa del pasado. Gracias a la rigurosa rotación en MTV, el heavy metal no solo estaba vivo y bien, estaba listo para adueñarse del mundo.
We've been told countless times that this music is dead and over, and it's a constant quest to prove that's not true. It's always going to be there at a certain level. It's never going to be dead. Never.
you thinking? Did he fire 6 shots or only 5? Well, to tell you the truth, in all this excitement, I've kind of lost track myself. But Ian, this is a .44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and would blow your head clean off. You've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?